Welcome to Wesley Impact. This is a television program of Wesley Mission where we share with you various aspects of our work. I'm really glad you're joining us today. Today I'll continue on my message series looking at what it means to have sharp minds that are focused on working for justice. Last week I talked about prophetic speech, and I'll continue that conversation today and also look at the importance of prophetic action as well. My guest in the studio today is my friend, the CEO and pastor of Wayside Chapel in Sydney, John Owen. Welcome, John. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Stu.
So, what is Wayside Chapel? Give us a bit of an intro into the work of Wayside Chapel.
What is Wayside? What isn't Wayside? So, look, we've been open since 1964 when we were founded, and we're from the very heart of the beginnings. We were always an experiment in trying to do things differently, trying to do church differently, trying to call to society that there is a different way to live. And it's always been grounded in the work and care for the most vulnerable members of our community. Back in the 60s, it was elderly people living alone and isolated in bed squats. And, you know, because the Cross was in a very eclectic area with a mix of wealth and poverty, which still reflects to this very day. And then over the time, it became the kind of epicenter for the drug culture and the hippie counterculture in the 70s. And Wayside was at the heart of it, running a coffee shop, always inviting people from both sides to connect in community and to hear from each other. You know, there's a famous theatre that was there that's now been long abandoned and demolished and rebuilt, where people could gather together, the hippies and the beatniks with the cops and the judges and the bikies all together, and the microphone would always be handed over to the founder and he would have the last say. And then we moved through the 90s with the AIDS epidemic and the heroin crisis, always being right there on the front lines. You know, we've had a quite a rich history, always based in relationships. So the Institute for Aboriginal Affairs actually began at Wayside, and then the Freedom Rides with Charles Tex Perkins, they left from the front doorsteps of Wayside. Always not because we were ideologically or politically driven, but we were driven by the depth of the relationships that we had.
And all based in those early days, particularly out of King's Cross, which is very much the heart of what you do now, although you've expanded beyond that. And how's the Cross shaped the work of Wayside?
Well, the King's Cross community is so utterly unique, not only in terms of the socio-economic differences with, you know, probably Sydney and Australia and perhaps even the world's most wealthy people living alongside some of the nation's poorest. It's also been a place of diversity and acceptance. And so what the Cross was in the 80s and 90s isn't necessarily what the Cross is today, but the core DNA is it's the place where you can be accepted when you have lost all other acceptance.
And like Wesley Mission, Wayside Chapel is a parish mission. So what does that actually mean? I mean, how does Christian faith drive what Wayside is and does?
Well, we're deeply rooted in the Christian faith, in that the way we present to the world is we strip away all the adjectives and the nouns and we just focus on the verbs. You know, if we're commanded to love, let's go and love. If we're commanded to care, as we see in Matthew 25, to feed the hungry and to help visit people in hospital and in prison, let's just do that. And so that's really the focus for us. But we say we're centred in relationships, and we find that where we connect as humans, I always say that we find our purpose through the people that we meet. And if we find our identity in Christ, then we see that we are committed to something beyond ideology, beyond political sides, beyond labels of conservative, liberal and evangelical, and we are free to meet people as they are and accept them where they're at. And when we can extend love to them, we see, you know, one of the core planks of our philosophy is we say no one is a problem to be solved, they're a person to be met. And as we meet people, in a non-judgmental way, we see people are more likely to open up and to be able to share where they're at on their journey, which, you know, there's no normative way. And then as a pastor, one of my privileges is to be able to walk and journey with people through all the seasons of their life. You know, we're not here to make addicted people sober or bad people good. We're in the business of helping dead people come back to life.
Yeah, Fantastic. And look, King's Cross, iconic location here in Sydney. You're also doing work in Bondi, another iconic name, even for people outside of Sydney, but also across many other suburbs as well. Talk to us about that footprint. It's not just about the cross anymore, is it?
No, 6 years ago we worked in a partnership with the Bondi Beach Parish Mission and had conversations, and then we became Wayside in Bondi Beach. And I think wherever we go, as the Wayside Chapel, what we find is, regardless of where you come from or the situation you were born into, we all deeply crave connection and we all deeply need relationships. I think the lockdowns and the pandemics have helped us all realise that we're all in a state of vulnerability. Yes, some more so than others, but we all need one another. The uniqueness of Wayside as our footprint grows is we're always looking for places where people are living very close. We're still very fortunate to live in a country where the rich and the poor can live close to one another, but we work hard to create a space where we say we're not a crisis centre, we're a community centre. Come and discover who's in your neighbourhood, but also maybe even find your purpose through that.
Yeah. And one of the places that happens for Wayside Chapel is in the chapel gardens. Talk to us about that.
Our rooftop garden is one of the things we're the proudest of. It's still the largest rooftop garden public access in the Southern Hemisphere. And it's just a little place where people can come and garden. You know, we have a beautiful volunteer who first would have come to us as someone who was sleeping rough. And, you know, through community, he helped get his life back together and into a little place. And he's just been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And it's pretty aggressive. And just 3 days ago, we said, what can we do apart from all the basic management stuff? He said, I just want to come in once a week and garden in the rooftop garden. And we see it's healing. You know, I think when you're sleeping rough, you are on the streets, but you're also in the concrete jungle. And there's something very healing about getting back to the earth and getting back to nature. And, you know, we say that, you know, a session with your hands in the soil is probably worth 10 with a psychologist. And there's a very beautiful organic spirituality that leads to deeper conversations around seasons and seasonal the seasonal nature of life. You know, life is about birth, death and resurrection and, you know, all these concepts that all of a sudden can easily weave into beautiful conversation.
Yeah. John, what's a typical day at Wayside Chapel? Is there a typical day? I mean, you're a pastor and a CEO. I mean, how do you bring those things together and what does that look like for a typical day?
Well, first of all, I don't believe there's any such thing as balance in your life. That's a myth that the health and fitness gurus kind of sell you. But I think I have about as much control over my day as you do, Stu. So I wake up and I control that which I can, which is I will wake up, I will exercise, and then I will have a time of prayer and reading and meditation. And that's about where the control of my day ends at that point. Heading to the office, so I'll have a full book of meetings, but that can all of a sudden come. You know, I was in the middle of some budget meetings and there was a lady downstairs holding the ashes of her partner who had just died in prison. And I had to just stand up and say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to continue this meeting without me because, you know, you've got to work out which hat to wear when. And the most important thing, the power of Wayside always will lie in our proximity to pain. And so we will always work in such a way that we can keep the main thing, and to be able to share the love of Christ with people at the worst moments in their lives in the faith that they will lead to better days.
Fantastic. I'd like to pause there just for a moment, and when we return, we'll hear a little bit more about your journey to Wayside Chapel and your role as CEO.
If you would like to learn more about Wesley Mission, visit wesleymission.org.au. You can find help in our community services, connect with our church and congregations, discover a volunteer role that suits you, stay up to date on the latest news and information, donate to support our work, and help make a positive difference in your community. You can also connect with us on social media and subscribe to receive the latest news and information about Wesley Mission directly into your inbox. Visit wesleymission.org.au.
Our website has all the information you'll need to connect with any area of our work, to stay up to date with the latest news and information from Wesley Mission, and to contact us if we can be of help to you, a family member or a friend in any way. My guest in the studio today is John Owen. John has been the pastor and CEO of Wayside Chapel since July 2018, taking over from Reverend Graham Long, who was in that role for 14 years. Now, you first came to Wayside in 2016. What were you doing before then, mate?
Certainly not aiming to become a CEO of any organisation, that's for sure. So when I was in 1996, I was getting to the last year of my university studies, which was computer science and electrical engineering, and I got to a crisis point in my life, and I thought, Lord, what do you want me to do with my life? And please answer, not become an engineer. All of a sudden, through a certain series of conversations and a course I had to study at university, you had to do one subject which was non-technical. I did a theology subject because I grew up in a Christian family. I thought, I'll ace it, it'll be easy. And I was opened up to this God who has a heart for justice, who sent his son, who announced good news to the poor, and the kingdom would come as we serve the most vulnerable members of society. And I thought, who's living this out? So I signed up to a 2-week course for an organisation that was called Urban Neighbours of Hope. And they were groups of passionate young Christians who were moving into marginalised communities and neighbourhoods, and they weren't throwing up big signs or opening church doors. They were just opening their homes, inviting people in, inviting people off the streets to come and stay with them. I stayed there for 2 weeks with some refugees from Burma, and also met some people who were a woman who was taking in women who were escaping domestic violence, and I was just captured. And this 2-week course became the next 20 years of my life, living and working and extending hospitality and doing home detoxes and a whole range of nearly getting arrested a few times, doing a few things. It just came to life. And I was really driven by the statement that the life of faith is a daring adventure or it's nothing at all. And the woman who was taking in women escaping domestic violence, we soon fell in love and we got married, and one thing led to another. We had a few kids. We've got 2 beautiful girls of our own, and we adopted a 3rd girl. And we were just living the life. And then we really felt the time was coming to an end there as our kids were getting into the later teenage years and HSC, and we felt it was the right time to ask God what's next, because there's no retirement in the kingdom. No. There's just the next assignment. And so all of a sudden I get a call from Graham Long, if you know him, that croaky, raspy voice. He said, "Come on, big fella, I'll buy you a kebab out in Western Sydney." And he said, "Listen, I can't do this forever, and I really think there's a role for you at Wayside. It's kind of the perfect mix of still doing the ministry that God had called Lisa and I to, and doing it in just a little different way as from the base of a established parish mission."
Yeah, fantastic. And now, so Mount Druitt, King's Cross, Wayside, Bondi, now you have 140 staff, 600 volunteers. How important is that community to the work that you do, those staff and volunteers?
Absolutely central. Through lockdown, most of the focus of our work has been how do we move from a centre-based operation where we work hard to create safety and security in those places, all of a sudden not being able to have the doors as open as we once were and allowing people to congregate, is how do we work with the staff and the volunteers to be able to still be just as effective through outreach, through home visiting, whilst maintaining that safety, but also keeping the connection going. It's been, I think, as you would also realise, is most of the pastoral care now has shifted towards supporting staff and volunteers through this time, because anxiety is ruling the day at the moment. And, no one can give certain answers about what the next I think the next couple of months is going to be very different even to the last 18 months as we change tack in the way we're addressing it, and how do we maintain a sense of focus on our mission, but also maintain a sense of hope, but also openness and honesty and vulnerability through that time.
Awesome. Part of the fundamental ethos of Wayside Chapel, and I love seeing this being lived out, is know us and them. Tell us what that's about and why that's so important.
I was thinking about that this morning, and in Genesis, right at the start, when the creation story begins, there's 2 cosmic events that occur, and we often think at the end of every day, God said, and it was good. Actually, the first two, there's no commentary on it. It's the separation, heavens from the earth and the light from the darkness. And the separation is not necessarily what is called good. As Jesus was sent to this earth, it's about bringing it all back together again. And so as we begin to connect together again, that's what God sees as good. And if our identities are in Christ, then it's not in an ideological position. It's in the pure joy of meeting someone. Martin Buber said, all living is meeting. As we move from an object-subject, from professional to client, we kind of walk away from that language and we meet one another as equals. And I love Charles Spurgeon's great quote, which is, I'm just one beggar helping another beggar find bread. And when we can be in that position as alongside each other, we can walk together. Aboriginal activist Lila Watson's quote's one of my favourites. She said, if you've come to save me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is tied up with mine, then come, let us walk together. And that's a beautiful picture of ministry for me, is to say, I don't have the answers for you, but I'm desperately trying to find what it means to follow Christ, who not only heals, but also gives me purpose in life. Come walk with me, and let's see if we can find what yours is too.
Yeah, and I see that lived out so powerfully at Wayside when you have multi-millionaire business people, serving alongside people who are living on the streets. It's awesome.
And there's no pretense. We have people who are captains of industry. We had the Governor General is a volunteer. He leaves his security detail because, for 5 minutes of his life, he's no longer Governor General. He's Dave out the front. And, you see these captains of industry will cite their 3 hours a month being sworn at by people as the highlight of their week, because people just see them as a person, not as a title, not as a role, but just as someone, and they're only judged on their kindness.
Yeah, fantastic. John, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for the wonderful work that you and the Wayside Chapel team do. It's such a privilege to partner with you at Wesley Mission, of bringing the transforming love of Jesus to our city and to our state. God bless you in the work that you do, and it's been great to have you join us. I'll be back with you in just a moment.
I think people are amazing. We can turn dark to light. We can fly through storms. We can change worlds, but we can't always do it alone. If you need help, we could work together. Find out more at wesleymission.org.au. We are here for you.
Please get in touch with us. If Wesley Mission can help you, a friend or a family member in any way, we are here for you. Over the past few weeks, I've talked about having sharp minds focused on working for justice, being prepared to engage in prophetic witness and prophetic speech. Today, I'll continue with that theme and talk about prophetic action, particularly as it relates to gambling harm and other injustices in our community. It's time. It's time, and it's always been time for us to move one step beyond compassion to addressing the injustice that leads to such suffering. The gambling industry, let me be crystal clear. The gambling industry is a perverted and demonic form of wealth distribution. Unrestrained advertising luring our young people into its addictive spiral is outrageous. Now, we must and we will continue as Wesley Mission to render assistance to people lying in the ditch of gambling addiction, but we also must address the root causes. We must work for change. Our governments, it has to be said, they're as addicted to gambling as the pensioner who is at 1 a.m. in some lonely suburban club feeding money into a machine while she's being plied with free drinks and food. Our governments are just as addicted as gambling addicts are. The gambling industry is injustice and its associated suffering writ large. We must speak up with holy, righteous indignation, seeking justice and defending the oppressed. So, minds seeking to achieve justice will engage in prophetic witness. They'll engage in prophetic speech, and finally they'll engage in prophetic action. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the famous German theologian who stood courageously and lost his life in doing so against the Nazis, he said this. He said, "We're not simply to bandage the wounds of victims beneath the wheels of injustice, we're to drive a spoke in the wheel itself." In 1954, Martin Luther King Jr. was installed as the 20th pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery. And later that year, in November of 1954, he preached a famous message, a sermon called Transformed Nonconformist. And in that message, he said this: "The Christian is called upon not to be a thermometer conforming to the temperature of his society, but he must be like a thermostat, serving to transform the temperature of his society. Do not be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind." A woman who heard that message is called Rosa Parks. A month later, in December 1954, 5 blocks from the church where Martin Luther King preached that message, she got on a bus. She sat, as she had always done, in the coloured section, the section that was set aside where African American women like her and men, that was the only place they could seat. And as the bus went along, one stop after the other, the bus slowly filled up until all of the seats allocated to those who were white were gone. And the bus driver said, "Time for you to stand up. A white person needs your seat." And Rosa Parks remembered that message, and she felt how tired she was. Tired of always having to stand up when she knew it was unjust to do so. And so she refused to stand up. She said later on, "I was tired of it." And it wasn't a physical tiredness. She said, "The only tired I was tired of giving in." She was arrested. There was a court battle. In the weeks and months that followed, there were bus boycotts. The civil rights movement gathered pace. And over time and over decades, in a way that's still playing out today, Rosa Parks and those who joined her determined to put a spoke in the wheel of injustice through prophetic action. When we think of this, prophetic action, we don't have to look very far in the scriptures to find many examples in the prophets of the Old Testament, in Jesus himself, who in prophetic action overturned the table of the money changers in the temple, protesting their exploitative practices. And so I have this question ringing in my ears and burning in my heart. What would it mean for us to drive a spoke in the demonic wheels of poker machines and sport betting apps? Or let me put it this way. What are you and what are we tired of? And what will we do about it? And there we'll find the action perhaps that God is calling us into. So sharp minds, they engage in prophetic witness, they engage in prophetic speech, they engage in prophetic action because, you see, we march to the beat of a different drum, we dance to a different rhythm, we sing a different melody, we're peculiar, we're weird, we're God's people, we're called to be salt and we're called to be light. And to do so, to engage in this sort of prophetic work, is inherently risky. It requires courage. For an organisation like Wesley Mission, where we have so many partnerships, particularly with government, aren't we in danger of biting the hand that feeds us? Yes. Should we? Yes. Should we say? Should we act? Should we speak? Definitely. The fight for justice is not an easy path, and at Wesley Mission, we will not compromise on our calling to love people as God loves them, to see all people as God sees them, and to be the salt and light in our world. As Martin Luther King once asked, will we be either a thermometer conforming to the temperature of our society or a thermostat transforming the temperature of our society? Wesley Mission and the Christian Church, well, we're called to be thermostats. Here at Wesley Mission, we are prepared to do all that we can to see justice for all. I would like to invite you to join us in that mission. If you have any questions about the Christian faith or any questions about anything you've heard in today's program, from my conversation with John or in my message, please do not hesitate to be in touch. I'll be back in just a moment.
At Wesley Mission, we see kindness change kids' worlds. You can find out more at wesleymission.org.au. We are here for you.
Thanks for being a part of Wesley Impact today. I deeply value this time together. If Wesley Mission can be of help to you or the people you love in any way, please get in touch. The doors to Wesley Mission are open 24/7, and we will do all that we can to help you however we can. We mean it when we say we are here for you. Thanks again for your time today, and I'll see you again next week on Wesley Impact. Every blessing to you.
Wesley Mission walks alongside people of all ages struggling with homelessness, addictions, mental health issues and financial stress. To find out more, visit wesleymission.org.au.